patient's first encounter with a hospital or a healthcare organization, even the doctor, is typically through a revenue cycle management software solution. In our case, when we're setting an appointment and we're dealing with scheduling, those are all part of the intake portions of the revenue cycle management system. Going through the system as they encounter the clinicians, as they undergo tests or procedures, and then on the back end, when everything is coded, and then billed out to the appropriate parties, and ultimately when a bill comes in the mail for the patient to pay. There are also times where the patient is required to pay up front to fulfill their deductible before they can even have their procedure. So they need to make sure that they pay their deductible or their copay before their procedure will actually be authorized to do, and that's actually part of the checklist. So not only are you NPO after midnight, but also did you pay this fee, and if you overpay, the hospital will reimburse you, but you typically won't be allowed to go on with the procedure until you make your payment. And that gets into the intricacies a little bit of the U.S. healthcare system, which we'll be looking at in a video later on. Now, in the previous modules, we discussed about the electronic medical record and the clinicians documenting in that record, whether they be pharmacists or nurses, physicians, of course, as well as other ancillary staff. These documentation incidents or events would include things like medication administration, catheterizations, dressing changes, wounds, therapies, things of that nature, tests, whether they be blood tests, EKGs, or go down for MRIs, CT scans. All of this information that gets put into the electronic medical record ends up being billed out based upon charges. And we'll talk about a charge master later on as well. All of these various events are utilized in a business intelligence manner to determine staffing based upon perhaps acuity for nurses on the floor, based upon the number of tests that are being ordered or that are being interpreted. So all of these things not only impact how much the patient's charged and ultimately how much the payer of the hospital stay is being charged, but also helps allocate resources for the hospital, whether it be durable medical equipment or personnel. Part of this data, and arguably the most important part of this data, is utilized to determine throughput. And throughput is extremely critical for hospitals. Any facility you have will have some sort of a bed briefing or some sort of a daily staffing meeting where they determine how patients are flowing through the facility, whether it's inpatient or outpatient. This helps determine the effective utilization of the resources that we just previously talked about, including staffing as well as resource allocation for durable medical equipment and ancillary staff. When a CEO of a hospital or a healthcare organization looks at who their actual customer is, that customer we typically think of as being the patient, but the reality is that the customer is the physician. And the reason is because if you go to a physician and a physician says that you're indicating for a knee replacement or for some sort of an inpatient stay for some reason, depending upon who your physician is, will ultimately dictate what facility you go to. Now, as a consumer, we choose our patients based upon our insurance. So that's another reason why it's important that, when we're switching insurances, we want to try to maintain the same doctor if we can. However, that's not always possible. Of course, that's a pain, but we choose our insurance sometimes is how we determine our doctor. And then, of course, the doctor determines which facility we're actually going to ultimately end up in. This kind of gets down to the business of healthcare. So if you're looking at it from a business perspective, the CEO's responsibility is, number one, to drive revenue. So, of course, they want their doctors happy because they want their doctors to refer their patients to their medical facility, which is why they want to make sure that their operating rooms and their facilities meet the physician's needs and requirements so that they continue referring patients, driving that revenue. The second thing the CEO is responsible for is ensuring profitability. So not only are they making sure that they have the revenue, they also need to make sure that that revenue is profitable. Ultimately, the CEO reports to a board of directors who hires the CEO. And in a for-profit, that board of directors reports to the shareholders. Now, the shareholders, of course, are people that own stock in that facility or in that healthcare organization. And it could be that they own mutual funds that have ownership of that stock. So it's pretty clear to see who the shareholders are in a for-profit facility. In a nonprofit still has to make profit. It's still a business. Instead of being owned by shareholders, it's owned more or less by the community. But at the same time, the CEO still has to ensure that there's revenue coming in and ensure it's profitable, because otherwise the nonprofit would ultimately fold. So you still have to make money as a nonprofit. The difference is that money is not distributed to the shareholders. It's reinvested back into the facility. And on top of that, it ensures continued services to that community. So the nonprofit still has to make some sort of profit. That profit, again, is turned back into the facilities with upgraded, emergency rooms, upgraded facilities. Perhaps they purchase ambulatory centers to increase their scope, providing offerings to their community. But with indigent care and the poor, some people think it's okay that, well, we just have nonprofits, they'll just take care of it. Well, no, they still need to make a profit as well. And that's why that indigent care is so important, is that, we need to make sure that all of our patients, regardless of ability to pay, are being provided services to and are being taken care of. But whether it's a for-profit or a nonprofit, both business structures need to actually make profit.